About 17 years ago, I was living in Tesuque, New Mexico. I was working at Los Alamos National Lab at the time, and I was working from home, which was really unusual because at that time I had a high security job with 2 security clearances that were normally preclude the working from home. But they let me do this because at that time I was super pregnant with twins, and I mean really pregnant. So there I was, home alone, working at home. Then I looked over to the bed to the left, and I noticed that the power cord from my laptop, my work laptop, was snaked across the sheets, and the laptop was gone. And that's when it hit me that we must have been robbed. And I was really glad that the dog was okay, but then my next thought was, oh, I'm actually in really big trouble. The work laptop was gone. This giant ball of ice settled on my gut and my chest, and I thought, this is actually really bad. When a high clearance employee loses a laptop, that's a security incident. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna lose my job for sure. That was no question. So I got calm for a second and thought, okay, what are my choices? What am I gonna do when I call Jim? What am I gonna tell him? And I'm thinking, maybe I can lay it on kind of thick and tell him about the fact that, he knows I'm pregnant and home working. Maybe I just need to tell him, look, Jim, here's the thing, thank you so much for letting me work from home. And it's a really good thing too, because I am so big right now, it takes me like an hour to get to the bathroom. And if that's not bad enough, here I am working from home, and I just left the laptop there for a few minutes while I ran to the doctor. I was only gone 5 minutes. And then who even stakes out a house where there's a pregnant woman at home on bed rest? I mean, what kind of creep would do that? And I'm thinking I could really play this up, and surely he'll feel sorry for me, because, it's not my fault that someone robbed our house. But as I'm thinking about that, I'm realizing that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to be such a victim, really, in that situation. And so as I thought about it, I thought, okay, I know what I gotta do. And here's what I did. I called him and I said, Jim, I really screwed up. I went to the doctor's office, as I had to do today. And when I left, I didn't put the laptop in the safe like I should have. And I'm really sorry, because when I got back, I was gone maybe 40 minutes. When I got back, it was gone. We'd been robbed. Laptop's gone. I'm so sorry. I know that this is troublesome for you. You went out on a limb to let me work from home. What can I do to make this easier for you to handle? I don't know what it is you need, but just let me know. And he took a beat. It probably was only a few seconds, but it felt like, hours while I waited for him to respond. And the first thing he asked me was, are you okay? Are you okay? Is your family okay? I told him, yeah, we're all okay. And then he asked me if I'd called the police, if anything else besides the laptop had got stolen. Was it, the laptop itself being targeted? What was the deal? And I informed him about all that. And then he asked me, was there anything on there that was sensitive? And we came to the conclusion that the big threat here was that my laptop could give anybody who had it access to the portal that gets into the lab, if they were clever. And so he said, we're gonna have to change your codes today. And I was expecting that, because I'm waiting for him to tell me, you're gonna lose your job, we have to let you go. Thanks for telling us, but we have to let you go. So I'm waiting for him to say that. And I said, that's fine, anything you need me to do or sign, that's all good. And then he stopped for a minute and he said, Lisa, we really enjoy having you work here in the program office with us. We really like the projects you bring to bear. We love how hard you work and your insights. And again, I'm just waiting. And what he said was, and I want you to know, as much as we appreciate all that, what I really appreciate more is the character you've shown today in owning your role, really, in the laptop being stolen. But I also want you to know it's okay. And when you come back from maternity leave, I want you to know for sure you're going to have your job waiting for you. that was not the outcome I was expecting. It wasn't the outcome I was expecting at all. And I thanked him and I hung up. And here's what I want to have us together think about, come back to. As wonderful as it was that the outcome was not what I expected, you know, if we think about that moment where the cold ball of ice, that fear was there, I think we all have moments like that. We all face times when all we're facing is one really bad option and another one that's worse. Sometimes those moments happen because of a decision someone else makes, and we're stuck. We can't have things turn out the way we want them to in those moments. And sometimes it's something we've done. You'll recognize those moments for yourself if you think about it, because you'll be frustrated. Think about times when you're frustrated and you're stuck. Maybe time when you're feeling scared. Maybe there's a time when you're doing a lot of complaining. And I want you to think about a time like that that's important to you in life, where something really important to you isn't going the way you want it to. Stuff's just not working. Jot it down. If you have a piece of paper, take a note. Think about what that most hot issue is. And while you're thinking about that, I'd like to share with you a story about a guy named Dan. Dan was really stuck. He was really stuck in work and at home. Dan was the CEO, is the CEO actually still, of a then $8 billion company that did renewable energy. He was a phenomenal leader and a practicing Buddhist. He was a husband and a dad, and people generally liked Dan. He called me about 12 years ago. He had heard of my work, and he called me in some desperation. And he said, Lisa, I've heard about what you can do with people, and I need your help. Okay, so I asked him to tell me what was going on, and he said, lately I have just been off in a big way. The last year and a half, I've been losing it with people in my life. Yelling and venting and complaining. I don't think that's like me. And it's not a good thing. And I'm under a huge amount of pressure to be sure. There are things that are not going well, things that people should be doing that they're not doing. Man, but I'm losing it with them, and I need your help. So I said, okay, tell me about, give me an example. And he told me about being in a meeting a couple of weeks back where he had the entire senior leadership team in there. They were having a conversation about a strategic acquisition that they were wanting to make. And the board of directors was on the speakerphone in the middle of the table. And he had asked this guy from audits and accounts to come in. His name was Jeff. And Jeff came in to give a preliminary report. And the preliminary draft report was going to help them make this decision. So it was important. He came in and he's delivering, his report. And it's a draft and he's stumbling over it. There are mistakes. There are numbers that aren't adding up, and there are spelling mistakes, and the chairman of the board can't understand everything that Jeff is saying, and he's asking Jeff to repeat himself, and he's saying, can you explain this? And Jeff couldn't answer it, and it was just getting more and more tense. Dan's getting hotter and hotter under the collar, and just outside the boardroom door, this huge ruckus starts up. And it's like there's a huge movie crowd out there. People are laughing and talking, and all of a sudden now nobody can hear each other in the boardroom. And before he can think, Dan tells me he shot out of his chair and to the door, and he swung open the door and he said, "Shut the bleep up." I don't think he said bleep. And everybody in the waiting room and in the boardroom just goes dead silent. He says, "We're having a meeting in here. Please keep it down." And he comes back in the boardroom, and people are looking kind of nervous, and he says, "Please continue, gentlemen." And everyone kind of picks up where they are. Even though it worked out okay, the meeting concluded, Dan knew that wasn't so great. A couple of hours later, Dan's telling me he brings Jeff into his office, and he's intending to tell Jeff, that report, I did tell you that it needed to be, that it could be a draft, that's okay, but it really kind of needed to be a little bit higher standard than what you delivered. You need to know that. And he's planning on telling Jeff this. And instead Jeff comes in and he says those words, but then it starts turning into Jeff's character, and he's yelling at Jeff, and he's tearing him a whole new page. And Jeff walks out of there feeling about the size of a worm. Dan's telling me that he realizes he's eroding the goodwill that he'd built up over these years of leading the company, and he just doesn't know why. And he said, to top that all off, my wife of 12 years has decided to leave me with our 2-year-old. I'm at my wit's end. She says that she can't stand this explosive behavior. I'm thinking, yeah, I've been more agitated lately, but it hasn't been that bad. Can you help me understand this, Lisa? And as he's asking me now for help and explaining all this, I said to him, I really hear you. I hear you. This sounds incredibly frustrating and hard, and I'm hearing you tell me that people aren't doing what you think they should be doing, and they're not living up to your expectations, and you're not reacting in a way that you feel that good about either. And he said, yeah, that's it. I said, okay, well, let's try something, shall we? And he agrees. He said, I'd like you to play a game with me. Okay, so let's just play the game of trying to identify what choices you've made that have contributed to the creating of this situation, whatever it is. You can pick any of them. And he starts with Jeff, and he says, okay, I get it. I realize that when I asked Jeff to come in and give a draft report to the board and to the SLT, I probably needed to tell him what the standard was of that draft that he needed to meet, because I didn't tell him that. Yeah. So I said, this is important. I said to him, Dan, it's not about the what you should have done. It's not about blaming yourself. It's really about just know that that's the choice you made. So I chose to ask him to come in and give a draft, and I didn't choose to tell him what the standards were. Well, that's good, I said to Dan. That's right. That's how you made that choice. Okay. And as he's thinking this through, he said, okay, I get it, I get all that, but the problem is that, I'm not allowed to make mistakes in my job. I can't show up less than perfect. Why would Jeff feel like he needed me to tell him that his draft to the board and all that should not be at a higher, why would he need me to tell him that that had to be at a higher standard? I'm not allowed to make mistakes, why should he? It's a good question. So Dan thought about that for a minute, and he said, yeah, that's kind of an issue for me, isn't it? I really hold myself to a super high standard, and then I beat up on other people because they don't meet my standard. And I asked him, what are you afraid of if somebody else makes a mistake in your company? What's the problem? He said, I think if somebody else makes a mistake in my company, it makes me look bad. It makes me look like a bad leader. As soon as he said that, he had this, his shoulders slumped back and his eyes opened wide because he just had this big realization. He realized, wow, so that's not actually about them, is it? It's about me and my fear. Yes. That's one of the things I love about Dan. He is so honest, so courageous. He's so willing to take a hard look at what's not easy. So when Dan realized that fear was really running him, he had this enormous realization. And that's what happens for all of us. We all do this. When fear steps into our life, a lot of times we don't even see it. We just react to it. And we react in 3 big ways. We will react by doing a people-pleasing thing. And that people-pleasing might look like avoiding conflict, or it might look like making things feel good between people so that they don't get upset, so that we feel safe. Fear might also look like kind of creating distance, and it looks like kind of distancing yourself from people and getting maybe a little arrogant. And fear can also look like getting really controlling. So what I mean by that is that fear happens and then our reactions look like this. Our reaction is to people please. Our reaction is to pull away and get distant. And our reaction is to get controlling. And that's what Dan was doing. He was wanting to control how everybody was being. There's a right way to do it, and you should do it my way. And if you don't do it my way, I'm going to rage at you until you get it and you stop. So when Dan had this realization, what he was doing is something that really provides freedom from all that reaction and allows us actually to have creativity in the face of those moments instead. And here's what that looks like. He was doing something I would call radical ownership. He was taking radical ownership. And here's what radical ownership is. Radical ownership is two things. It's knowing the limits and the extent of your locus of control. And the thing here is to know, what does locus of control even mean? What's in our locus of control? We have control over three things. We can control what we do, we can control what we say, and we can control the thoughts that we indulge. That's not the same as controlling what we think. Some of the things we think we can control, and some of them just happen. We just have thoughts. So we can control those three things. And if we are really clear about how much of that we can control, which is all of it, and that's all we can control, then we've got a good handle on the locus of control. But there's another thing that's really important, which is we have to then be able to make choices within that locus of control that are in alignment with our own integrity. And so for Dan, it wasn't in integrity to be yelling at his wife and daughter when he said he loved them. At work, it wasn't in his integrity to be a great leader who then demeans his own employees. So for him, locus of control is really important, and making choices within that locus of control that are in alignment with his integrity was what he did. That was the taking radical ownership. And you and I can do that too. We can all do that, no matter what situation we're in. We think that ownership is something heavy and burdensome or self-blaming, and it's not. It's actually the pathway to freedom. People also kind of think that freedom is something we either have or don't have based on the situation, but that's also not true. As soon as we're in radical ownership of really whatever is going on, our piece of it, we automatically have freedom. So coming back to Dan, here's what happened for him. He had an incredibly powerful leaderly conversation with his leadership team. He said, I've been a stand for being a company where we can invite creativity and innovation and where people are safe to speak their mind. And instead, I've been crushing people. And that is not right. That's not workable. And as soon as integrity was restored, which it was the moment he owned it, the people on his team were able to have powerful conversations with him as well. And as CFO said, I could have worked with Jeff so that he could meet the standard I knew he needed to meet when he delivered that draft report. His CMO said, I've been talking about people behind their backs, and that's not cool. CHRO said, I've been shutting down and not telling you that I've been seeing this behavior. I've been holding back. And they all started to see what impact they all had on the creation of their experience. And what happened after that is they started working together again like a team. And the company began to thrive again. EBITDA went up. Engagement scores went up, trust in leadership went up. And what's really awesome is within 6 years, that company doubled in market cap. So then it was at 16 billion. All of that was awesome. It really made a difference for Dan. But what was really powerful is that at home, he had that same kind of conversation with Maria. And she took a little longer to own her part, but she also came around to owning her part in the creation of what their dynamic was. And now, today, they're still married and they now have 4 children instead of 1. So magic is really possible for all of us when we take radical ownership. That radical ownership opens up the doorway to freedom. I've seen it again and again. I've seen it in families, I've seen it in nonprofits, I've seen it in government, I've seen it in other companies, big and small. And it's an incredible thing when you can see how it applies just kind of everywhere. It makes untenable situations that look like they're going to go really badly at least have the possibility of not going so badly, like with my boss and the stolen laptop. We think of radical ownership as being so, like confining, but it's not. It's really the thing that allows us freedom. It's the thing that makes it, actually, it's the only thing that makes it possible to really have joy in life and to succeed at doing whatever it is we want to do. The things that we imagine that we want only are possible with radical ownership. We can't do them without that. And as you think about the things that are going on in your life that you want to see be different, I want you to think, where have I helped make it be like this? Because as soon as you see that, then you have the opportunity to make a different choice. The thing that you've done or said or chosen or felt even or believed about what's frustrating you, when you see that you created it, you created that reaction, you created that way of being, you can create a new way of being. As soon as you see what you've created, you can create something different. So when you're willing to get really radically honest with yourself about what you're really choosing, what thoughts are you indulging? What are you doing? What are you saying? Then your life really becomes yours to create. And it's like you can wipe the canvas clean of all the clutter and just have free, open space to paint the future the way you want to see it be.